Good afternoon, everybody. It's Saturday, June 20th, and today's video I've been wanting to film for quite some time. I want to show you all of the new varieties of figs that I'm growing this year, as well as take you through all of my old varieties from last year and show you how they're all performing. Now, I just did a count and I have a total of 44 fig trees and 41 different varieties total. So I have 3 doubles mixed in there as well. So due to the nature of this video, I'm going to have to freehand the camera, so it's not going to be as still as I'd want it to be, but the figs are very dense in there, so I'm not going to be able to use a tripod to film this, so I appreciate you bearing with the shaky camera. So my very first new variety is the very first fig that rooted for me during the winter, and this variety right here is called Pastiliere. Not to be confused with unknown Pastiliere, which is a Smyrna variety. Pastiliere is a common fig. It does not require pollination to set fruit, and the tree is already about 5 feet tall. It's very vigorous. It's growing as a very compact single stem, and as you can see, it is starting to load up with some figs. So obviously I'm quite happy about that. It has some big ones here that are starting to come along, but this variety has a habit of dropping its figs the first year or two, so I don't know if any of these are actually going to ripen, and I don't really expect them to, but it's already starting to lignify at the base, and it's pretty big, so I'm really happy with how vigorous the tree is, and I have enough fig varieties right now that if I don't get this to fruit for me the very first year, that is okay. The second variety that I want to show you is actually my first ever grafted tree. Here I have a graft of a Col de Dame Gegantina onto a Chicago Hardy rootstock that I had left over. So here is where the actual graft union is, and it's taken really well, so I'm really happy about that. One of the side effects of this graft, it seems to be, is that it's putting all of its energy into fruit production. It's just making an incredible amount of Col de Dame Gegantina figs, and it hasn't put on a whole lot of growth. But this one for sure is going to yield figs for me probably by the end of July as it stands. And it sounds like we're about to get a thunderstorm, of course, now that I started filming. But I'll go as long as I can with this video until we start the downpour. My next fig tree right here is a Cotio Verdeal, and this is also about 5 feet tall. It's almost up to my neck, and it's a very, very vigorous variety. And looking here, I'm not seeing any fruit forming at the nodes for me just yet. It seems like it wants to put all of its energy into vigor. Here you can see what the node looks like, and all it has is one single bump. A double bump implies fig formation. So we may not get any figs on this variety this year. Here you can see at the node, it looks like the very start of a double bump formation. So maybe I'll get figs off this tree, maybe I won't. It's kind of hard to tell, but if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. But it's growing very vigorously, so if I don't get any this year, I will surely get plenty next year. The fig tree right here that's kind of hard to get to is my Negra de Agde, and this is just incredibly vigorous. It sent out 2 beautiful vigorous stems, and they are just loaded with figs. Looks like we have one here that aborted, but it is just loaded up with figs, and I am very impressed with the production of this variety. I'm not 100% sure what the taste is going to be like, but boy am I excited about the production. And this monster right here in this yellow Home Depot bucket is a Galicia Negra. This thing is off the charts vigorous. Once again, it's about 5 feet tall, and it has sent multiple stems in all directions from the base. This right here was the cutting, and it's just sent shoots everywhere from the nodes. And Galicia Negra has a reputation for not wanting to fruit the first year as well, and I don't see any fruit on it just yet. At the nodes, I'm seeing mostly single bumps. I don't see any double bumps just yet. So, as expected, this may be a variety I do not get any fruit off of the very first year, but in a couple of weeks, if I don't see any double bumps, I'm probably going to pinch it. Oh, I take that back. Here is a double bump right here. So it is starting to form a double bump. One is going to be a leaf node, one is going to be a figlet. So it looks like I will get a fig or two off of this, and I'll probably wind up pinching it in the next week or two if I don't see more form, to try and encourage fruit formation. And for more information on how to pinch figs for fruit formation, I will link to a video above. And this fig tree right here is UCR 184-15 Strawberry Teardrop. That is a very large name, but that is, maybe it's because this is supposed to have very large figs, and that's why I went with this variety. I'm really trying to find varieties with good quality large figs because I just really like large figs. It's a personal preference. And again, very vigorous. The tree is 5 feet tall. It's looking fantastic, but I'm looking at the nodes and I still don't quite see any double bumps forming yet. Whether we will get any fruit off of this tree this year remains to be seen. I'm optimistic. If I don't see anything by 4th of July, wow, that's some crazy thunder. If I don't see anything by 4th of July, I'm going to go ahead and start pinching all of these trees to see if that will help encourage fruit growth. Then this tree right here with the very thin looking leaves is Ronde de Bordeaux. And Ronde de Bordeaux, the reason why I went with this fig is because it has the reputation for being one of the earliest fruiting and ripening figs in existence. And as you can see, it is loaded up with fruit, which does not disappoint, and it's what is to be expected. It has a reputation for being vigorous and prolific. And so far, I'm not disappointed. It has shoots in all directions with fruits in all directions. So that is a great thing. This fig tree is actually not one of my new figs. I have it thrown in the mix just because I had nowhere to put it. This is San Miguel Roxo, aka Azores Dark. It is a Mount Etna type fig, and last year it was kind of stingy with the fruit production, but I headed it at 18 inches, and now it just has a million figs on it. Some of them are probably going to abort and fall off, but this is a very prolific and productive variety, and it has figs that are very similar to Chicago Hardy, but in my opinion they taste better. They're bigger and they're jammier. So I'm looking forward to this one as well. Over here, this is a variety called Longue D'Aout, and this is a variety I've been trying to root for 2 years, and I failed last year and this past year. Somebody finally donated a tree to me for the cause because I can't seem to get this variety to work out. And it has not been vigorous, as you can see. It tried to load up on fruit, and it's not really interested in growing. And that's okay. This is a larger fruited fig, so maybe that's why the fruit set seems to be stunting it so badly, but I'm sure it will eventually start growing. Figs are vigorous and they do like growing, so at some point it's going to want to put on some top growth. It just doesn't seem to want to do it right now. This fig right here is Col de Dame Gegantina. I did take a node off of this cutting and graft it onto Chicago Hardy, and that was the tree that I showed you earlier. This one is on its own rootstock, and it is extremely, extremely vigorous. It has put on growth in all different directions. I'm very happy about that. The downside is because of the vigor, it has not put on any fruits at all. It's starting to get single bumps. Oh, here we go. And right here we have a double bump forming at the node. This cutting is rooting, it's well behind my graft, so it's just starting to put on the fruit right now. I am sure it will put on more. Here's another double bump that's happening down here, so we will get fruit off of this, but I'll have to weigh my options and see which tree performs better. Will the Col de Dame Gegantina that's grafted onto Chicago Hardy, or actually it's grafted onto a Marseille Black VS, sorry, or will this one on its own roots perform better? So that's something I'll have to weigh my options over the course of the year. This fig tree right here is a California wild fig that I am trying to test and see if it's a Smyrna or if it's common. It's called Meteorito. It was given to me by a friend as a gift, and I'm really excited to try this variety. I don't know if it will hold its fruit without the fig wasp, and right now I've been checking this tree pretty religiously and there are no double bumps at the nodes, so it's still in the vigorous growth phase. It's not wanting to set any fruit. However, it is just about 5 feet tall, and I am very excited to try it eventually. And since I'm solidly 3,000 miles away from the nearest fig wasp, if I can get fruit off of this, it will definitely be a parthenocarpic common fig. So I am a tester for that. This tree right here that does have figs on it is White Madeira #1. My cuttings failed, but I was able to attain a tree from somebody, and it's starting to set figs. The figs are they're a good size, and there are more double bumps forming at the node. So I'm quite happy about that, and I'm excited to try this variety. This is a green skin, dark red pulp type. This fig tree that you see right here is called Godfather. It is a cutting from one of the 2 fig trees from the original movie The Godfather, starring Marlon Brando, of course. So there's a long history with this tree, and I'm really excited to try this. I've heard it's actually a pretty good tasting fig, as if any fig could not be good tasting. This does not have any fruits forming at the nodes yet. I'm getting lots of single bumps, but no double bumps yet. However, I think it's only a matter of time. I would fully expect this to have some fruit forming within the next probably week or 2. And under here, here's one of the new banes of my existence. This is a kudzu bug. This is a new fig pest that is taking the United States of America by storm. I believe it's an Asian beetle that's made its way over here. I had an infestation of them earlier in the year, so I was able to handle them pretty well with a little hand vacuum, sucking them all up. But every now and again, I still find the stray bug or 2. So keep an eye on this pest. They like to suck the juice out of the new green growth of your figs. This beautiful fig tree right here is called Blava Campanera. I almost gave up on it. It took over 2 months for this cutting to root, but it finally did. And that's why it's so far behind the others. From Harvey's videos, this looks like a delicious jammy fig, and I'm happy to say it is loading up with plenty of figs. So this is one of those varieties that appear to be both vigorous and prolific, because not only is it 3.5 to 4 feet tall, it is loading up with figs at all of the nodes. So I'm extremely excited to see that, because boy, does his taste test video of that look good. And this fig tree right here is Sen Jaume Gran. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, but everybody is raving about this fig. It's a fairly new fig in terms of popularity, and I'm starting to get my first double bump at the node. And hopefully you can see it right there. There's 2 bumps forming, so that means that fruit set is imminent, and within the next week or 2, this should start loading up heavily with figs. So I'm thrilled about that. This is supposed to be a very good variety, and it's supposed to, from what I've heard, handle heat and humidity pretty well. This is another variety that I got from Harvey at Figaholics called 3N Prato, which is apparently a Portuguese fig that means 3 of them fill up an entire plate. And I'm starting to get one of the first double bumps at the node right here. So that means that within the next week or 2, this once again is going to be loading up with figs. And I'm starting to see 2 little bumps form at all of the nodes. So hopefully that means this will also be both a vigorous and prolific type. This little guy right here is a Col de Dame Grise. I got this cutting in late January, and it took months and months and months to actually root. This was the longest cutting that I've ever had take to root. But somehow it did not rot, it survived. And despite the fact that this rooted at the same time as most of my other figs that I just showed you that were 4 or 5 feet tall, this guy is not even a foot tall. But that's okay, it is alive, it is putting on new green growth. It is really starting to accelerate now that it's getting warm out, and we're doing great. And this guy right here is Colonel Littman's Black Cross. I had 2 cuttings, both of them failed. Somebody gave me a plant, and I am just thrilled about that, because this is supposed to be a variety that is of black Madeira quality, but much earlier and handles humidity better. And that is something that isn't hard to do, because black Madeira is one of the worst splitting figs, if not the worst splitting fig, in my collection that I've experienced so far. And finally, this fig tree right here, this is called Division Unknown. The roots got badly damaged when I pulled it out of the pot, so I think it probably failed. However, somebody gave me a whole bunch of cuttings, so that right there is an extra one. So I'm probably going to replace this likely dead one with this very healthy 1 gallon plant. The roots are starting to come out of the bottom, so I think it's time to up pot this. And that, ladies and gentlemen, are all of the new figs that I am growing this year that I did not have last year. So those are all ones that I'm adding to my collection. Now I'm going to take you and show you all of the ones that I already had. And I'm going to start over here with my in-ground fig trees that you saw me plant back on March 29th as dormant sticks, and I'll link to that video above. You can see how fantastic they are doing so far. And we will start with our Smith fig tree. This is a fantastic variety. It is split resistant, it tolerates humidity well, and it is also incredibly vigorous. As you can see, this was just a little dead looking decapitated stick back on March 29th when I planted it, that was just starting to emerge from dormancy, and it is now easily 5 feet tall, and it is starting to set figs all over the place. And I'm very happy to see that it is going to set fruit, because first year fruit trees usually like to grow roots the very first year. So seeing that it's growing roots and fruits everywhere, very happy about that. It is doing well. The foliage is super dense. There's no signs of any kind of rust on it, despite the fact that we've had almost 10 inches of rain so far this month. And it's been incredibly miserable for June. So very, very, very happy about that. It is just setting figlets everywhere. The next one is my Col de Dame Noir. And Col de Dame Noir was both vigorous and prolific for me last year, and it maintained its vigor. This is my tallest fig tree. It is 6 feet tall. The one thing so far is that it hasn't put on very many figs. It is just starting to get little figlets on it. So I imagine that is a function of how incredibly vigorous it has been. It's so preferred growing roots and stems that it hasn't put on a lot of fruit, but not a big deal, because number one, it is putting on fruit. All the bumps that you can see here are figlets. They are starting, but I also have a double that's in a container that is kind of root bound, and that is fruiting fairly well. So I'll have plenty of fruits on my spare, as well as a handful of fruits off of this new tree as well. And I fully expect by next year, this is going to be one of my most prolific producers. Next to it is Col de Dame Blanc. And this was the slowest one to wake up from dormancy. However, it has almost caught up to its cousin, Col de Dame Noir. It's about 5.5, getting close to 6 feet tall. And what I'm thrilled to see is how many fruits this tree is putting on. As you can see, it's putting on fruits at every node. Really happy about that, at least on that leader. This one is also putting on fruits as well. So I think that we are going to have a good Col de Dame production on both varieties this year. So really happy about how well this tree is done. And then here we have my favorite fig in the whole wide world, Italian 258. And it has not grown as tall as the other one. And I'm going to show you why. This tree has decided that it just wants to fruit like crazy. And I'm not going to say it's a small tree. It's still bordering on 4 feet tall. But just look at the fruit set on this thing. This was a dormant looking stick 83 days ago. And now it is just full of figs, and boy, are they getting big. It has a really nice big one down here that's probably going to be ready in the next 30 to 45 days. So this is going to be one of my earliest figs yet again. And I can't believe it, because I just thought that this tree would want to spend more time growing roots and vigor than actually fruit for me heavily. But this is just an incredible variety, and there are just dozens and dozens of figs on the tree. So I'm very, very happy about that. The next fig tree is my Bordissot Blanca-Negra, And next to the Italian 258, it's getting pretty vigorous, and this was one of my most vigorous varieties last year. However, in container, it only set 3 figs for me, and that is changing. This year, it is putting on a fair number of figs. So again, very happy about that. It's loading up in the base here with really nice sized figs. And this was a very good performer for me in my heat and humidity and in my rainy summers. It did not split on me pretty much at all. So I think this is a good, it's a good variety for the southeastern coast. Very happy about that. It's performing fantastic. And then finally, my Martinenca Rimada. It is the least vigorous of them all. And here you'll see a little bit of sun damage. That's because the tree decided to wilt in our torrential rains a little bit, and then it got really sunny out of nowhere, and it just kind of burnt those areas of the leaves. But it's going to be absolutely fine. They'll be able to be removed with no problem at all. And you can see I have some nice figs that are forming in there. 1, 2, 3, whole bunch more over here, and I expect them. They're just starting to take on the variegated characteristics. Maybe you can see that, maybe you can't. They're so dark green right now that they're not showing much striping, but the stripes are just starting right here. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better. Now that I've showed you all of my new trees and my progress on my in-ground trees, let's start with the potted trees that I had last year, but I did not select for in-ground production. And I want to start with Violette de Bordeaux because a lot of people asked me this spring, why didn't I select this tree to plant in ground? And the reason why is because the tree has been giving me problems. I had to pull it out of its container. I had to root prune it because it just wasn't growing. It also had a little bit of trunk damage or something weird going on with it, and I had to paint it with tanglewood paint. And now it seems like it's finally recovering and it's leafing out, but it's so far behind all of my other varieties. And I had the same problem with this tree last year, so I might have to just cut my losses and take a cutting from it and propagate the cutting and start the tree all over again if it doesn't pick up the slack this year. But it's just not behaving properly, and I don't know why. It just may need to start from a fresh cutting. There may be something wrong with the roots of it, and maybe that's due to it being a tissue culture. I don't know. It might be too knotted up down here or something. I can't answer that question, but the reason why I did not select this variety is because it just hasn't performed. And I think this is one I'm probably just going to start again over the fall from scratch. I don't expect it to do too much. It was really late last year, and I think it's going to do the same thing to me this year. My Chicago Hardy, on the other hand, it wasn't a stellar producer for me last year, but this year it is doing better. A lot of people told me that Chicago Hardy just takes a couple of years to get good, and it is loaded up with just a ton of figs. This ripens quicker than most varieties, so I think I will have some figs off this tree probably at the end of July. This fig tree right here is a vigorous monster. It is a legendary tree from Central or Northern California. They call it the Carr fire tree. And this was sent to me to try and test it to see if it's common. And there's a really good chance this one is common, that it is Parthenocarpic. It's loaded up with a ton of figs that have not dropped on me. I got it really late last year, so there wasn't enough time to try and fruit it, but it overwintered just great, and it's gotten 5-6 feet tall, and it's just full of figs. So I'm excited about trying this, and it does appear that it is going to hold, but I will wait for sure before I make that final judgment call. This fig tree right here is my Raspberry Latte. Easily one of the most vigorous fig trees. I did not select it for in-ground planting because it's supposed to take a few years to get good, and I want to verify that. It's fruiting for me very heavy this year, and it has really cool looking figs. They are blushed with almost a red wine color stain, so it's just a beautiful tree. But this is one that everybody says takes a few years for it to get good. So I'm going to see if it gets better this year before I dedicate any in-ground space. And here is my other Martinenca Rimada. It is behind most of my other trees, and I think the reason why is this in the beginning of the year was the source of my biggest kudzu bug infestation. There were probably something like 24 bugs that were nesting on this tree and sucking the life out of it, so I think that slowed it down. And I eventually got rid of them all and killed them all, and then it started to bounce back. So now it is really starting to leaf out more aggressively, and it has a number of figlets that are forming all over the tree. So that's great to see. So that means it's healthy. It is coming back from the attack. However, my other Martinenca Rimada is doing really well, so I should have fruit no matter what, given that I have 2 trees. So I'm happy about that. This monster tree right here, which is one of my biggest potted trees, is my Col de Dame Rimada tree, which has since reverted. So it has lost the variegated stripes, but it is still a fantastic fig that is very similar to Col de Dame Blanc. So the reason why I didn't choose this tree to plant in ground is because I planted the Blanc and they're almost identical. If this maintained the variegated striping, I probably would have planted it for an ornamental, just because it looks so cool, but because it doesn't, I'm debating whether or not I'll hold on to this tree. Again, not because it isn't a fantastic tree, it is. It's just so similar to the Blanc that I don't really see the point in having a double. But this is incredibly vigorous. It is setting fruits. So it's right now it's just something to hedge my bets. So I love this fig so much. Until my Blanc gets very large and gives me a lot of fruit, I'll probably hold on to it because I just love the flavor of these figs. This monster fig tree right here is called Golden Dawn. This came from someone that found it in the wild in California, so we don't know if this is common or if this is a Smyrna. So we will find out together. This doesn't seem to be setting a whole lot of fruits. I do have some figs that are on it. You can see a couple of figs there. You can see a fig that's forming over here, but not incredibly prolific, at least when it's young. And again, things will probably change because I'm seeing a lot of bumps at the nodes. So maybe within the next couple of weeks, this will really start loading up. You can see a double bump that's starting to form right here, and they're forming all over the trees. So maybe this is just a little bit late, but I'm curious to see if it's going to hold its fruit. I got it late last fall, so I don't know too much about it. This is going to be its first full fruiting season. This tree right here is called Cinisi. It is a variety that I purchased for not a whole lot of money. I bought it last year. This is one of those Francesco Lorusso varieties. If you know the name, you know all about the guy. He's an Italian fig grower. We have no evidence if these are common or if they're Smyrna types. Last year, they dropped all of their figs. So it's probably a Smyrna. If it drops all of its figs this year, I'm going to cut it down into rootstock. But it's loading up with figs pretty well. So if you have the fig wasp, it's probably a good variety. But again, I'm in North Carolina, not in the Sacramento River Valley of California. So I can't grow any Smyrnas. So we'll see what happens with this variety. This variety right here is my Lattarula Italian Honey, and it's blowing me away. The fruit production on this tree this year is just off the charts. The figs are big, and they are everywhere, setting on every node, sometimes more than one at each node. So incredible fruit set, incredible production, and it looks like it's going to be really early on me. I had some problems last year with this fig tree splitting on me and with souring because the eye is pretty open, so that's why it did not make the cut for in-ground planting. However, I'm giving it another chance because it's such an amazing fruiter and it's so vigorous. And the handful that I did get that did not sour and did not get bugs in them were really good. So I'm hoping the behavior of the fig changes as it matures because, man, is it prolific. And down here is my Black Madeira KK tree. This got killed all the way down to the base in the winter, and I had to cut it down to a stump. And you can see it there. There was nothing left, but it sent one shoot up from the base, which has become the main tree once again. And I'm actually really glad that this happened, and I'll explain why. The Black Madeira cutting that I got, it was a very strange looking cutting. it was not very good looking. It did root. It was a slow rooter. It was a slow grower, but now it has a really nice root mass in that pot. But because it was such a funky looking cutting with a lot of twists and bends in it, I have a feeling that the internal network of vesicles in there and all of the, I don't know what you call them in a plant, whatever their equivalent to veins are, transpiration probably had difficulty taking the nutrients all the way up. So while it had incredible fruit set, it was not vigorous, and I had really tight node spacing on my Black Madeira. So cutting it down to nothing, I think got me a much more healthy shoot off of this tree. So the spacing is more like 2 to 3 inches between nodes, so that is much more vigorous, and I'm getting, once again, great fruit set at all of the nodes. And I'm hoping that now that I have really healthy green growth, I'm hoping that will correct the issues that I had with Black Madeira last year, because it wasn't hitting the mark, and it may be because I just got poor quality shoots because the cutting was just funny and mangled and dismembered. This fig tree right here is Noire de Barbentane. I got this as an air layer from Will's last year in the early fall, so it barely got established, and it took a lot of cold damage. It had a lot of dieback, and you can actually still see that some of that cold damage. So I may have to cut this down to nothing and rejuvenation prune it, just like I did with the Black Madeira, because like I said, it really did take a lot of damage because it never fully lignified. But all of the new green growth is doing really well, so I don't know if I'll have to do that or not. It's very healthy. The node spacing is good. The only problem is it doesn't have any fruit on it yet, but once again, it's starting to get double bumps at the nodes. If you can see that, that's a clear double bump. So within the next couple of weeks, it should be loaded up with figs, and if it doesn't, I'll have to start pinching the tree to try and encourage the fruiting process. This monster tree right here is 8 feet tall, and it is a Francesco Lorusso variety called Sangue de Drago Rosso, which means red dragon's blood. And this, once again, it's probably a Smyrna. It dropped all of its figs for me last year. However, this year I'm noticing a distinct difference in behavior. The figs are larger than they were last year, so that's a good thing. They're much larger, and there is just an incredible number of them. There are figs everywhere on this tree, and they're like the size of a $50 piece almost. So maybe by some miracle this will be a common variety. According to Francesco, a lot of his varieties take a couple of years before they start holding fruits. So I don't know if he's being honest or not. There's no real way to tell other than to grow them out for 2 or 3 years. So this will be its second fruiting season. Again, all of its fruit dropped the very first year. However, so did my Celeste, which is a common variety, and it is known to do that. So it's entirely possible he's telling the truth, and this will hold its fruit. And so far so good, because again, incredibly prolific, and it's holding all of its fruits so far, and they're larger than they were last year. So I have a little bit of hope. It's the same story for this other monster fig tree. This is another Francesco Lorusso variety called Sangue de Drago Buccia Marrone, which means red dragon's blood, brown skin. So it's supposed to be similar. Again, it dropped 100% of its fruit last year, but it is loading up with fruit really nicely. There's figs everywhere on this. Not quite as prolific as the other one I just showed you, but there's a ton of figs. They're not quite as big, so I don't know if they're going to hold, but there is the occasional large 1 or 2 on there. However, if this is common, that would be great, because this is just an incredible producer. Look at this little side shoot right here. This little side shoot's probably 4 inches maybe, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5 figs on there, so pretty incredible production, and they're all like that coming off the side here. Just on this little offshoot right here, there's 4 figs. So hoping that this is common, because it looks really promising in terms of production. This one right here is my spare Col de Dame Noir. I won't get into the variety too much because I already covered the in-ground tree, but potted trees generally fruit earlier because they're root bound. Since they can't put energy into roots, they have more left over to put into fruits, assuming that you fertilize them enough and that the containers don't wash out all the nutrients. So Pretty good fruit production on this. I think it's going to do well. I headed it last year at 16 inches, and you can see it there, and it's coming back strongly with all kinds of side growth, so I should get some fruits off of this tree. This fig tree right here is a Capra fig. It's called UCR 271-1, and this is a persistent Capra fig. The reason why I'm growing a male fig, despite the fact that it's not edible, is one day I would like to make some fig crosses with the pollen out of this. Obviously, I don't have the fig wasp here, so I'll have to do it on my own with syringes and collecting the pollen. It would be a very difficult process, but I think it would be pretty fun. I'm starting to get some double bumps on it, so it should make some male fruits for me this year. But the pollination crop that you need is the Profici crop, so that is the first one, so it's already too late for that. But again, the point here is to get this tree into good shape. I'm probably going to have to cut it down and prune it really nicely and shape it, because I may want to be able to use this pollen for next year to see if I can make my own common fig. And the only way you can make parthenocarpic figs is by crossing them with a persistent Capra fig. You can't use a caduceus Capra fig, or they will all be Smyrna and they will all drop without pollination. This fig tree right here is my Olympian, loaded up with very nice, very large figs. I almost regret not planting this in ground, but it was too small. It was a tissue culture last year, so it didn't grow very large, and I'm trying to grow it out a little bit more into a nice single stem. Also, some of the node spacing's really close, which I don't like, so I may have to either rejuvenation prune this and try to get it into a better shape to eventually put it in ground, or maybe these leaders will expand enough that I can get a nice shape out of it. But this is a really good common fig. It's an English brown turkey variant. Good quality fruits. It's just a matter of shaping this tree appropriately. Split resistant, tastes like peaches, really like it. And here are my final two fig trees. This one down here is my Marseille Black VS. It was killed down to the base, just like my Black Madeira, but it has struggled to come back. It is trying, but it has been like this for a very long time. It only had these two leaves on the side for months. It finally put out two new ones, so I think it's finally starting to recover. But considering this is supposed to be one of the cold hardiest figs, it took the most damage out of all of my figs. And it may just be because it woke up first. I think that's the problem. It woke up before any of my other figs, so we had a little 29-degree freeze that just cooked it and creamed it, unfortunately. So hopefully it will come back and I'll be able to salvage this for next year, but it certainly will not do anything for me this year. And my last fig tree right here in the containers is my Col de Dame Gegantina, which is, I believe, from the island of Majorca. And again, it kind of split for me a lot last year, and it was very attractive to bugs. So I'm hoping those problems work itself out as it matures. But lots of fruit set on this, lots more than last year. So it definitely is improving its behavior as it ages. I just hope that it kind of deals with the splitting and open eye and bug issue, but we'll see. And my last fig tree that I want to show you is my Celeste fig tree that is in my front yard. It has come a long way in a year, and it is just loaded up with fruit. So I have lots of fruits all over the place. Last year I had 100% fruit drop on this variety, so that's why I didn't really get to show you it. But this year I have much higher hopes. It hasn't dropped a single fig, and this is one of the earlier types, so hopefully I will know within the next 30 to 45 days if it's going to hold its fruit. And that's the complete overview of all of the fig varieties in my garden, new and old. I hope that you found it interesting, and I hope that you will follow along with me throughout the summer, because we will be reviewing and taste testing as many of these as possible. If they fruit for me and they make fruit that is worthy of a taste test video, I will be sure to do it. So make sure you follow along and look for updates. Everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you found it helpful, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for future updates and more videos like these. If you're curious about anything I use in my garden, everything that I use is linked in my Amazon storefront in the video description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.